All right. Here we go. The last one of the Old Testament. Marsha, we can hear your cheers all over here. All right.
An Israelite named Mordecai moved to a country called Susa with his adopted daughter Esther. The king of Susa was looking for a woman to become queen. When Esther finally got to meet King Xerxes, he was attracted to her more than any of the other women. So Xerxes placed a crown on Esther's head and made her queen. But Esther did not tell him that she was an Israelite. Shortly after, King Xerxes promoted one of his people named Haman. He commanded everyone to bow down as Haman entered each day of his day. But Mordecai refused. When Haman saw this, he was furious. He convinced King Xerxes to declare a law stating that all Israelites living in the region would be killed on a specific day because they would not follow the king's laws. When Mordecai heard about the law, he convinced Esther to go before the king, reveal that she was an Israelite, and ask the king to spare her people. Esther was brave and approached the king, who asked, "What is your request?" Esther said that she wished for the king to host a banquet and to make sure that Haman was there. When the day of the banquet came, she revealed that she was an Israelite and begged for her own life and the lives of her people. The king was furious with Haman and had him arrested and killed. Because of Esther's bravery, the Israelites were spared and even honored.
Not that end yet.
Over time, the Israelites who had been spread throughout Babylon and other countries began to arrive back home and worship God in Jerusalem at the newly rebuilt temple. But the wall around Jerusalem had still not been rebuilt, leaving it vulnerable to attack. There was an Israelite named Nehemiah who was living in Susa at the time. When he was told that there was no wall to protect it, he wept and prayed, asking God to help rebuild the wall. Nehemiah returned to Jerusalem and gathered the priests and officials and told them of his plan. The plan worked and the wall was rebuilt in only 52 days. Nehemiah wanted to make sure the Israelites were not only safe, but worshiped God with their whole lives. So after the wall was completed, he gathered all of the Israelites, and the priest Ezra read to them from the book of Moses. The people understood that they were not currently living God's ways. So they began to weep, but Ezra stopped them, instructing them to instead celebrate all that God had done and return to God's ways. So the Israelites did what Ezra said and began to party. This went on for several days. A short time afterwards, God sent another prophet named Malachi to the Israelites. Malachi warned the people of what would happen if they turned from God's way, but also reminded the people of God's promise to bless Israel and use them to bless the entire world. After Malachi, God did not speak to the Israelites through a prophet for 400 years, but God would not be silent forever.
All right, let's do our quick, let's just do 3 minutes here. That clock's off, but we have about 3 minutes. So questions and insights that you had from this chapter. You don't need as much time because it's not easy.
One thing,
You guys are one group, so you need to talk as a group here.
Okay. Cute. I thought it was different that there wasn't anyone leading the Israelites for like 400 years before Messiah came. I thought that was a long time for them to be without any real direction. There was no king or anything like that. I just, I wondered what they must have thought, that maybe God wasn't with them. Or he was, but there was no real leader, no, anybody talking to them.
Good question. And one of the things I was noting, and I was muted, I was thinking about how different we look at walls today than the way they looked at them in the Old Testament times. And how now we want to break down all the walls, and we want to all be one. And in those days, it was a form of protection between different armies and warring groups. And we still have the same warring groups today, a different kind of war that is going on in our society. But the wall, the whole image and symbol of the wall, I thought was striking.
I agree.
Do you remember Pink Floyd and his song, "We Don't Want No Education, we want the walls down"? It's a long time ago in the 80s.
Yep. That's.
I don't know why that came to mind. I taught 8th grade at that time, and 8th graders were really into Pink Floyd and that kind of music. But it was all about walls and taking them down. 1 minute, okay, who else has something to say? It sure sounds like Ezra didn't do a very good job of rebuilding the temple if the people were that awful. Now Nehemiah says, things are really bad. I got to get back there. Poor
Help them
Ezra.
out. Help them out. Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah,
I think it was interesting when they were building the wall that they also had to have protection against the enemy. And so they had the spears and the swords going and building the wall and praying to God. And they did get the job done. They had the strength of God in their hands.
All right, so let's talk about Nehemiah. So where we're at here in, just a reminder, in the scriptures, we're in Ezra and Nehemiah, which is broken into 2 books, but really 1 scroll, right? And so as we read through it, we need to remember that it's really 1 contiguous story of 3 individuals that kind of have control over it, right? So in the first part of Ezra, you have Zerubbabel, right? If you remember back to chapter 19, Zerubbabel is in charge, means planted in Babylon. Zerubbabel is one of that first wave to kind of go back, and they see that Jerusalem is not doing well. And his goal then is to remind the people to rebuild the what? Temple, because they're going back and they're concerned with their own lives, right? I need to plant me back in this land, right? So build my house, work on my things. If I have some extra time, I might be able to give it to God, right? And so Zerubbabel says, no. That is not how we order our lives. We order our lives with God first. And so we build God's house first. And so they build the sacrificing place where they can have relationship with God, because the temple is the place where God meets man, right? And so in order to have proper connection with God, we need to rebuild the temple. Is everyone clear on that? That's the first part of Ezra. That wasn't in the chapter today. So if you're like, I didn't read any of that, and that was 19, you might have already forgot about that. So that's that first part. The second part, the second movement is Ezra. So Zerubbabel doesn't get named, he doesn't get a name book in the Bible, but Ezra does. And do you remember what Ezra's main thrust is?
The law of
The
Moses.
law, right? So if we're gonna be worshiping God, we need to be following God's rules. And so he finds the book, he starts to read it out loud, he tells them, you're all sinners, and has the come to Yahweh sort of conversation with the people there, right? You are not doing what it says here. You are treating each other with really poor judgment, and all sorts of things, right, come out of this, and we need to be better as a society, right? So that's Ezra, and this is a tail end of Ezra. Ezra comes in here, right? As we gather around here, we learn a little bit more about the priests and what Ezra has to talk about, and asks Artaxerxes for some money, and that and guess what? Ezra does, or Artaxerxes does. They give him money. They give him stuff, and he keeps giving stuff to the people there. So, and so Ezra becomes the high priest and does the sacrifice, and that's kind of Ezra's space there, right? He is kind of go back to God, learn that God is your God and you are God's people, follow and obey the commandments, society will be okay, right? So, but at the end of Ezra, again, they're not following that thing. So he starts it out, says like, yeah, you should do this. Then by the end of it, you find out like the people have just kind of gone back to doing their own sort of thing. They do a little bit of church over here, but mostly the rest of their lives are, we're gonna just do our own thing, right? Then we get Nehemiah. Nehemiah actually comes out of the word. So anytime you have Yah at the end of a name, right? Jeremiah, Nehemiah, Zechariah. That is just a shortening for Yahweh, right? And so Nehemiah means comfort, the comfort of the Lord, right? And so Nehemiah is what?
I don't think we knew that.
Yeah, well, today you learned one thing. Congratulations. So Nehemiah, he has a really interesting job. He's a wino, right? He's a sommelier, right? You might say. He's the cupbearer. So he gets the opportunity to have a little drink here and there. In fact, that's his job. Not to find out whether or not it's the right year, or the tannins are correct, or the legs that are running on the wine, but instead if there's poison in it or not, right? So you drink it first, you don't fall over and die, then I'll drink it. It's a great test, right? We got plenty of other people who will just rise up to do this. Here's the thing about Nehemiah and Ezra that we can't really cover here, but you should kind of keep in mind. Ezra goes back, and he is one that, and he consistently calls upon the law, as we talked about, right? Ezra's calling upon the law. And in doing so, he really imitates and mocks, not like in a bad way, a pejorative way, but instead like he gets raised up as kind of a new Moses, right? He is the one that is urging his people on to be like that new Moses that exists within there. And there's a lot of like biblical hyperlinks. I don't know if you ever used that phrase or heard that phrase. So in the New Testament, we're going to get biblical hyperlinks like crazy, right? And in the prophets, they also use biblical hyperlinks. They will quote things from other spaces. And what the intention isn't that you just read that one line, but instead it's like a hyperlink. Do you know what a hyperlink is? So you're reading an article and the word has like an underline and sometimes it's blue, and you click on it, it goes to a whole new article to give you the understanding of what happened there, right? And so when you're reading in the Old Testament and the prophets, and then in the New Testament, when you get that hyperlink, the idea from the author is not that you just read it, but that you understand the whole of the story that helps inform the hyperlink, right? Because they're not going to give you the whole thing. They don't want to run you through the whole law, right? But they want to just give you this little bit of a line, and that should help you kind of click on it, go back, remember all of this as you're reading all of this story. So in both Ezra and Nehemiah, they do a lot of these hyperlinks. So Ezra is a lot more like Moses. Who do you think Nehemiah is a lot more like? What's your guess? If Ezra's the new Moses, who's Nehemiah? He's not the new Aaron, so I know that might have been a natural movement for that. Not David. He's not like a king. Who took over from Moses?
Joshua.
Joshua. So what we'll find is that Nehemiah is like a new Joshua. And the way that he acts, that we know that, is because there's like a million lines. It's almost like some of these things are copied and pasted from back in Joshua. And we could do that if we were just going to focus in on Nehemiah and had a lot more time. We could go back and do the back and forth. But now, just trust me, or do your research on your own when you're done with this. If you want your homework. What you'll see here is that Nehemiah, the comfort of the Lord, is a lot more like Joshua in his presentation and actions, right? He has a calling from God to go out and to do things in Israel. And his goal then is to kind of rebuild the walls, right? So, interestingly enough, Nehemiah and Ezra are used in a lot of building campaigns for churches, right? They're touted for these. Look at this. With the Lord, we can build the walls faster. And you are members of the Lord, so give to the walls, and we could build a wall or whatever it is. New gym or.
Did every city have a wall around it?
Every city had a wall around it. Absolutely. Yeah, and in fact, if you ever get a chance to go, not only there, but like any of the ancient cities, right, you'll see that's one of the things that they excavate right away, so that they know some of the boundaries of it. So they put these big walls up, and they definitely fortified the city so that people couldn't just walk in, especially at night, right? You found safety in the wall. So where are we at here? The beginning, so on page 294, 95, this is Nehemiah 1, chapter 1, verse 1, right? And what we have here is he's in Susa. Where is Susa? No?
Persia?
Persia, the capital of Persia. Remember we covered that? So he was in Susa at the citadel, and one of my brothers, Henny, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant and that survived the exile and about Jerusalem. And they said, things are not good, right? Said to me, those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem was broken down and the gates have been burned with fire. And he loses it, right? He just feels sad that the walls are not there, the thing that offers them protection so that they can continue to worship in the temple. These sorts of places are not there. And so Nehemiah, he has things. And then this is great prayer that he offers. And this is a hyperlink, as I was talking about. This is not a Joshua hyperlink, but instead one that we hear in the book of Deuteronomy. Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and his commandments. Let your ear be attentive and your eyes be open. Hear the prayer of your servant is praying before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. I confess the sins we Israelites, including myself, my father's family, have committed against you. Let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant, and let your prayer of your servants delight, revering your name. Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of his man. So he is going to the Artaxerxes, and he's going to say, hey, what happens after this is he goes there. Artaxerxes is like, kind of sad today. You okay? You doing okay? And he goes, you know what? I'm really bothered. I need to go back. These walls are crumbling down, and like I need to fix those. And Artaxerxes says, yeah, go ahead and go. And I'll give you a bunch of stuff to help build those walls, right? Well, he goes back and he starts to build these walls, right? And so you can kind of see that plays out here. And as you get down to 296, then I said to them, see the trouble you are in Jerusalem lies in ruins, and the gates have been burned by fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. We no longer be in disgrace. As I told them, the gracious hand of God is with me. And that what the king had said to me, they said, let's rebuild the wall, right? So they began the good work. Now, what's the problem when you start to build walls? Well, they got stones, yeah, but what else?
Material and labor.
All of a sudden, you are looking a lot stronger than you once did, right? So he runs into a bit of an issue with a few folks that are around them. And eventually he actually has to use armed guards to build the stone, right? Because people keep plucking off his people. And so Nehemiah overcomes the hostile plots and all sorts of things happen as they rebuild the walls, but they ultimately get the walls rebuilt, right? And so now they have the walls rebuilt and the temple is there. And so let's go to 300, page 300, because after the walls are rebuilt and all the things are in place, everything's going well, they get everyone together again, right? And they're gonna, like, now we have the walls, we have the temple, we have, the book of Moses, like we have all of our stuff in order here, right? And so Ezra, the chief priest, he opens up the book and, he starts to read the book of the law, and all the people are like, no, we aren't doing this right, and they get, you know, they get convicted by the law, right? They hear the rules and the commandments of God and they realize they have fallen short. But Ezra doesn't stop them at this, and they celebrate the Feast of Booths or Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles. It's the 7th of the different Jewish festivals that happens. Do you remember this festival? Do you remember hearing about this? Okay, it'll come up again. I'm not going to ruin it for you yet, but I want you to be aware. Keep your ears open to when we hear about the Festival of Booths or the Festival of Tabernacles or Sukkot. This is 3 names for the same thing. And essentially, it's 7 days of camping, right? So it's a reminder to the people of Israel that they lived in the wilderness. And as to not get too haughty in the nice, fancy, everything else that you live in now, these comfortable houses that you've erected for yourself, they take time to celebrate. But in the book of Numbers, there's two chapters that are back to back, 28 and 29, and they cover all of the ways, all the sacrifices that you're supposed to give. For Sukkot, you have to give a sacrifice every single day. So it's like 7 days of sacrifices.
I think
Wow.
today they build temporary shelters on their balconies.
Yep.
In Israel, and they live out there during that week.
Yep, some people do. Some people go
Well,
camping.
it's really,
Yeah, some people do it in different ways, right? But the
How
idea
do
is,
they
that-
do the offerings of the,
well, so they don't have a temple right now. So the offering is different. The understanding is different, right? You can't do burnt offerings if you don't have the temple. The Temple Mount, remember, is where the mosque currently sits. So the gold dome mosque, if you're.
They'll only rebuild the temple in the spot where they think the temple has been.
That's what God asked for it to be. So the sacrifices have been offered for years. This is like where it's going to happen. And like I said before, when we covered Ezekiel, there are plans, and that's more to it. But so they do this work. You know, you see in 301, about halfway down. So the people went out, took branches, built themselves temporary shelters for their own roofs and the courtyards and the house. They lived in the square of the Watergate, and Gate of Ephraim. The whole community returned to exile and shelters, and they lived there. From the days of Joshua, son of Nun, until now, the Israelites have not celebrated it like this, and their joy was very great. So it's a really joyous celebration, and you can see then day after day, they lived there for 7 days. And then on the 8th day, in accordance with the regulation, there was an assembly, right? They have a festival kind of thing. And you can find all of those days in Numbers 29. You can just read all the joys of the 15 bulls and the 5 rams and the 6 turtle doves, or whatever they do to offer, right? It's every day's got an appointed amount of bulls to kill. Which I've always wondered how they got as many bulls. But I think it's a communal killing. So it's like you have a bull, you have a bull, you have a bull. I don't have like 15 bulls, because that'd be a lot of animals to try to keep without killing each other or yourself. So and we can, another time we should do a Bible study on sacrifice and offerings. I think those are fascinating, like how they picked what they picked, what they symbolize, why in particular do they do that? But that's for
Wasn't God displeased with their sacrifice at this time?
that was, yeah, you're right. So that was earlier. They were sacrificing the lambs, and they were that had blemishes, and they were
Right.
like, "Oh, take that one, give that one to God," right? That one's got the 5th arm. We don't want that one. And so they were, again, they were putting themselves first. And the concept here is you just come back from exile. The whole thing that happened, you were in exile because you didn't follow God. And now you want to do the minimum in order to, God freed you from exile, sent you home, built all this stuff up, and now you're not getting this. Like, you folks are just not getting it here. Like, you literally understand this. Like, you have been in exile. You're first generation folks, and they're not getting it, right? All right, so that's where Nehemiah's story ends in the story, but there's a few other things that I wanted to talk to you about. Sometimes there's a then from chapter 8 till about chapter 12 in Nehemiah is like this really happy time, except for there's one, I don't remember which section. There's one time where all of a sudden we start to hear about the way that they charged, they're charging interest.
Oh, yeah, that's against the law for them.
Well, this is why I wanted to bring it up, but I forgot. Okay, so it's chapter 5. So we skip over chapter 5 in here. And in chapter 5 there, all of a sudden you see Nehemiah kind of just like, what is going on here? And I want to bring it up because so there's two controversial things that happen in Nehemiah and Ezra that are not covered at all in the story. One is the concept around intermarriage. Ezra says, no, right? And it's like harsh, like that.
That was
And so in modern day, that gets brought up, right?
That's on page 303. Page
303?
Yeah, they talk about.
Yeah, but
being
that's
a-
Malachi. This is the
Oh,
book of Malachi here. Yeah. And so, and Malachi does the same thing, right? Because he'd be a contemporary at the same time in terms of prophecy. But Malachi talks more about like fidelity and things along that nature. So anyway, in here, you'll hear that the people in chapter 5, now there's an outcry of Nehemiah. Now there's an outcry of people and their wives that, against their Jewish kin, right? These are folks within the same group. These are not others that are out there. This is like an internal thing that's happening. And there were many who said, with our daughters and our sons, we must get grain so that we may eat and stay alive. Makes sense, right? That's what we hope for. And there were also those who said, we are having to pledge our fields, our vineyards, and our houses in order to get grain during this famine. And there are many who said, we are borrowing money on our fields and vineyards to pay the king's tax. Okay. Now, our flesh is the last as that of our own kindred, and our children are the same as their children. And yet they are forcing our sons and daughters to be slaves. So we are having to take out loans against our own kids. This is either one of two things. They are taking a loan out. They are raising a debt ceiling so that the taxes of the fathers and mothers can be paid by the children and grandchildren. That's one interpretation. The other interpretation is that they are literally selling their kids into slavery so that they can pay their taxes, right? Okay. And some of our daughters have been ravished. You can understand what that means, right? Yeah, we don't need to be clear about how that is. We are powerless, and our fields and vineyards now belong to others. Nehemiah loses it, right? He is like, this is absolutely against everything. And this is where he comes at the people and starts to talk about how the law forbids interest-bearing loans against each other. If you're going to lend things out, you should lend them out He says, look at me, I was allotted all this food, I have not taken it to my advantage. And he just kind of helps the people say like, we do not want to live as a society like this. So the only reason I bring that up is because if anybody is doing anything in Nehemiah, oftentimes this chapter is one of those chapters that gets kind of lifted out. You should know about it. It wasn't highlighted in the story. And that's the section of that, right? And Nehemiah just kind of straightens things out. And the people change, and they do kind of as they promise. So he's like, give everybody's money back, everybody's kids back, everybody's stuff back. Everybody's got to go back to, the way we have it. Now, folks will say, well, that happened in the year of Jubilee, but there's no actual record of the Jubilee year ever happening, just being proclaimed to happen. So we have that too. All right, I wanted to get that in there. Now on to Malachi, which is the last kind of couple pages that we have here, right? Malachi is the last book of the Old Testament, right? So if you go all the way to find Matthew and flip back a couple pages, there you have Malachi. And as we read through it, here it is. A prophecy of the word of the Lord to Israel through Malachi. And there's all sorts of things that Malachi does here. But he talks about what we talked about, the animals. By saying that the Lord's table is contemptible, when you offer blind animals for sacrifice, is that not wrong? What sacrifice is lame and diseased animals? Is that not wrong? Try offering them to your governor, right? So if you're going to pay somebody and they bring you a 3-eyed sheep, you're going to say, bring it back to the herd. I want the 2-eyed sheep, please. And I prefer one that looks well. Says the same thing. Listen, just because you can't see God, we shouldn't treat God any differently than the people that you see and are under rule of, your governor, right? Your king, your principality. There's all sorts of things that happen there. And again, it continues to talk about the next page. But we ask, how are we to return, right? When he says, return to the Lord your God, and I will remember you, and people say, how are we to return? Will a mere mortal rob God? Yet you rob me. But you ask, how are we robbing? In tithes and in offerings. They continued to steal from God's storehouse or the temple, right? They're using God's things not appropriately. And then God says something that's really interesting here. Test me in this, right? And see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will be not enough room to store it. Right? And it's a really interesting space for God to take with God's people, right? And when it comes to giving to the church, this is always kind of a touchy subject with folks, right? Because we don't really have a tax, right? You don't have a pew tax. There used to be one, not here. I don't know about here, but like there used to be a space that it said like, it costs us X amount of dollars to run this church, and we need you to pay at least this much. Here's your dues, right? Pew dues. They used to do that, right? They would lay it out to every family. If you want to be a member of this church, it costs you have to pay a certain percentage in order to be a member of this church, right? And so these old churches that in Minnesota we used to go to, they actually had little name plaques in different spots because they paid for their spots in their pews. We've kind of said that was probably not a great way of going about running the church, right? So we've gotten to a better spot around it, right? And we ask people instead to think about how they're giving. And Paul will do a lot more with this. But here we have this kind of understanding of if we just give let's just, give what we can. Let's make sure we get our bills paid. And then after that, let's have a little fun. And if we have a little money after that, we'll give it to the organizations that can use it to help people, right? That's kind of the way that Americans tend to do generosity, right? Here, God in Malachi kind of flips that upside down and says, listen, your giving should come to me first. Your giving should come to me whole. And in doing so, it's that whole flip around of what we've been talking about all the way through Ezra and Nehemiah. Who are you putting first? And how are you ordering your life, right? Jesus will talk about this. Paul will talk. The number one thing that Jesus talks about, right? Patrick, don't talk about money in church. Number one thing that Jesus talks about, money. Jesus talks about money all the time. There's so many references to money because it has so much power over us, right? It does, and we don't want to admit it. We don't want to talk about it. We feel guilty and shameful, so then we say, Patrick, don't talk about money. Right? Yet it is something that even I and Rachel, we talk about. How are we ordering the way that we not only live our lives, how are we ordering the way that we raise our kids, right? How are we talking about money with them? How do we do that conversation? And God here says, bring me your tithe, I dare you. I double dog dare you, right? And see what happens. And I've heard story after story after story about people reordering their lives financially, and all of a sudden things transform in their lives, right? And that may not look like right away the way that that it happens, but here this is what God is saying, like you start giving, and here's my challenge. This is what I always say when I get into stewardship. If you think I'm just saying give the money to the church, and you are skeptical that I'm just trying to fundraise for the church, fine. Find a different organization and give your money there and see what happens, right? What I'm saying is if you reorder your life in a generous fashion, right? It transforms the way that we live. And here God actually uses this method in Malachi to say, I double dog dare you to give it a go, right? Just try it out. See what happens when you do it, right? And people come back and they say, evildoers are prospering in this work, right? So you're telling us to give you money, and yet there's all these evildoers, these people who are not doing the right thing. They are the ones that are getting ahead in the world. And God just says, listen, don't worry about them, right? Focus on you. Evil will not have the last word. I will have the last word, right? And then there's this beautiful imagery that comes at the very end of our book here today. These last two chapters are paragraphs that are here. Surely the day is coming. It will burn like a furnace. All the arrogant and every evildoer will be stubble. So the day of and that day that is coming will set them on fire, says the Lord, right? Hellfire and brimstone. Not a root or branch will be left of them, but you who revere my name. The Sun of Righteousness will rise with healing in its rays, and you will go out and frolic like well-fed cats. Then you will trample on the wicked and the ashes under their soles, and your feet on the day when I act as the Lord Almighty. Remember the law of my Moses and the decrees and laws that I gave him at Horeb. Remember, that's the Northern Kingdom's version for Sinai, for all Israel. And see, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before the great and dreadful day of the Lord. He will turn the hearts of parents to children and the hearts of children to parents, or else I will come and strike the land with total destruction. Right? The impossible will happen. Parents and children will love each other again, right? All parents and children, all those children. Yeah. It will come back. This is how Malachi then ends in there. And I think that it's a fascinating process to bring this in as we see Elijah is to come. So when they're celebrating Elijah, the door is left open and Elijah comes in, he drinks it, the wine, it's left out for him at Sabbath, and they wait for Elijah to come, the Jewish folks do. We turn the page, right? That while this isn't the ordering of the Hebrew Bible for the New Testament or for our Bible, we turn the page, right? And as we turn the page over to Matthew, we are reminded of the genealogy, hyperlink back, right? All these things that have happened, right? And then Jesus is born, the wise men come, and then in chapter 3, in the days when John the Baptist appeared, proclaiming repent for the kingdom of God, here we have this guy who lives out in the wild, wearing camel's hair and a leather belt, and eating locusts and wild honey. He's a crazy dude. He's talking about repentance. He's doing that same work that we remember back from Elijah, right? And that's what happens for us. So Malachi is set there to say, here we go, Jesus has come back. And here's Elijah that's coming in to ushering in this new kingdom, right? All right, it's a lot.
So when the Almighty says, surely the day is, let's see, on the day when I act, is that like our coming of the Lord?
So I think you could say that, like, that God's action happens then. Although I think for us, more often than not, we would settle on that for when the day of the Lord returns, right?
Yes.
That as God returns, all will be brought back into righteousness. And this concept around like the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its wings, right? And you will remember that phrase because we'll come back to it, right? This is kind of like a setup here, and I want you to kind of keep this stuff in mind. And if you've ever seen little calves, have you ever seen them when they're really well fed? They go out in the grass, out of the barn into the grass. Have you ever seen that? And they frolic. They literally jump around. They're so excited. It's like one of the things that like instantly brings you into like an idea of like just being happy as can be, right? And they are. And that's the imagery that gets brought out. We'll go out like and frolic like well-fed calves, right? Just happy. And who are we fed by? Fed by God. We are calves. We're not fully matured. We're children. You see the imagery being brought in here, right? 400 years of silence happens between here, the intertestamental period. You can go ahead and read any of the Apocrypha that you like while we take a little time, but that's that. All right, so let's pause here.